Coins look like the kind of money people should trust forever. They have weight, they have metal. They seem to belong to the physical world in a way paper never could. That is why their failure was so dangerous. Because when a paper currency weakens, people may blame policy. When a coin begins to lose value, something deeper starts to crack. The object still feels real, but the order behind it no longer is. And history is full of moments like that. Empires that kept minting coins even as those coins carried less silver, less credibility, less ability to hold together the world around them. At first, the change looked small. A slight reduction in metal, a subtle shift in purity, a technical adjustment inside the mint. But outside the mint, nothing stayed technical for long. Food prices moved. Pay lost meaning. Taxes became harder to bear. Good money disappeared from circulation. Bad money spread. Trust narrowed. And once trust narrows, society begins to harden in strange ways. People hoard. Merchants protect themselves. Soldiers demand more. States reach further. Order becomes more expensive to maintain. So this is not just a story about coins. It is a story about what happens when money stops carrying the same reality for everyone at once. Coins were supposed to reduce uncertainty. That was one of their great historical advantages. A stamped coin could travel farther than personal trust. It could move between strangers, between villages, armies, ports, and tax offices. It gave trade a common surface. It gave power a measurable form. That is what made coinage so important. It did not just help people buy and sell. It helped states collect, armies move, wages settle, and obligations become legible. A coin turned authority into something you could hold. And yet, the paradox begins there. Because the same power that gave coins credibility often became the force that weakened them. The ruler's image on the metal looked like stability, but sometimes it was the opposite. Sometimes the face of empire was stamped onto a coin precisely when empire was running short on silver, short on patience, short on room to maneuver. The coin still announced order, but the system behind it was already under pressure. War had to be financed, officials had to be paid, debts had to be managed, frontiers had to be defended. And when revenue failed to keep pace with ambition, the temptation was always close. Not to abandon money, but to stretch it. That is why coinage is never just a story of metal. It is a story of trust organized by power. And once power begins using money to conceal strain instead of absorb it, the coin stops being only a symbol of order. It becomes evidence that order is becoming harder to maintain. For most of history, coins were never just small tools of exchange. They were part of the architecture of order. A coin moved through a marketplace, yes, but it also moved through barracks, ports, tax rooms, warehouses, temples, and imperial offices. It passed through ordinary hands and official hands alike. That is what gave coinage its historical weight. It helped price grain, cloth, oil, salt, land, labor, and transport. It helped merchants compare value across distance. It helped rulers collect revenue in a form they could store, count, move, and spend again. It helped soldiers believe that service would be paid. It helped states turn obligation into something measurable. In that world, coinage was not sitting on the edge of society. It ran through the middle of it. Markets depended on it. Cities depended on it. Armies depended on it. Tax systems depended on it. And empires depended on the belief that these small pieces of metal would continue to be accepted tomorrow, much as they were accepted today. That is why coinage mattered far beyond trade.
A stable coin helped connect the farm to the city, the taxpayer to the treasury, the merchant to the port, the frontier soldier to the capital. It gave distant people a shared language of value, and once that language began to weaken, the damage did not stay inside the mint. It spread outward, into prices, into wages, into provisioning, into state power itself. Because coins were not merely objects in circulation. They were part of the infrastructure that held imperial society together.
One of the clearest examples came from the Ottoman Empire. For long stretches of Ottoman history, the Akçe was not a marginal coin. It was one of the monetary foundations of imperial life. It moved through markets and tax channels. It paid soldiers. It settled obligations. It helped connect the court, the provinces, the merchant class, and the military frontier through a shared unit of value. That role made it powerful, but it also made it vulnerable. Because once an empire begins to depend on a coin at that scale, pressure on the state eventually becomes pressure on the money itself. And the Ottoman state was under pressure. Wars were expensive. Frontiers had to be defended. Officials had to be paid. Administration had to be maintained across vast territories. Supplies had to move. Loyalty had to be financed. An empire can project strength across continents, but it still has to meet payroll. That is where monetary strain stops being abstract. The court did not need a theory of breakdown to feel the problem. It needed silver. It needed revenue. It needed a way to keep the machinery of rule moving, even when fiscal reality became harder to manage. So the Akçe began to change. Not in a way ordinary people would describe in theoretical language. Not at first. The coin still looked official. It still bore the authority of the state. It still entered transactions under the same imperial order. But inside the coin, something was shifting. Less silver, less substance, less distance between monetary adjustment and political desperation. This was the logic of debasement. If silver was limited, but state needs kept rising, one response was to reduce the amount of silver in each coin and stretch the metal further. More coins could be produced, payments could continue, the appearance of continuity could be preserved. On paper, or in decree, the unit remained. In practice, the ground beneath that unit was weakening. And that distinction mattered, because money does not fail only when it disappears. It begins to fail when its official meaning and its material reality start drifting apart. That is what made the Ottoman case so important. The Akçe was not becoming useless overnight. That would have been easier to see. What made it dangerous was that the coin still functioned, it still circulated, it still passed through the hands of traders, taxpayers, soldiers, and officials, but it no longer carried the same confidence. And once that happens, erosion begins quietly. The state may see a technical adjustment. The public begins to feel something else. Not immediately collapse, something slower, a background thinning of certainty. The coin still says empire, but the market starts asking, how much empire is still inside it? That question spreads fast in any society built on payment, taxation, provisioning, and military obligation. Because when the state weakens the substance of its coin in order to preserve the appearance of order, it buys time in one place by creating doubt everywhere else. And doubt, once monetized, does not stay contained. It moves outward through prices, wages, contracts, and daily survival. That is why the Ottoman Akçe matters here. Not simply because it was reduced in silver content, but because it shows something larger and more unsettling. An empire does not always announce its stress through open failure.
Sometimes it reveals it in the quiet thinning of the coin that holds its world together.
Once fiscal pressure rises, the change rarely begins in the marketplace. It begins inside the state. An empire at war needs silver. It needs payroll. It needs transport, supplies, administration, and time. And when revenue no longer keeps pace with ambition, the temptation is not always to stop spending. More often, it is to change the money. That is the system logic behind debasement. If the treasury has less silver than it needs, one solution is to reduce the metal inside each coin and strike more units from the same stock. The face value can appear stable. The state can keep paying. The machinery can keep moving. For a moment, this looks like relief. But the relief is uneven. And that is where the real damage begins. Because once weaker coins enter circulation, society starts sorting money by instinct. People keep the better coins. They spend the worse ones. Silver with more substance disappears into hoards, chests, private reserves, melted stock, or long-distance trade. The thinner coin remains in everyday exchange. Good money retreats. Bad money spreads. The state may still call both coins money. The public begins treating them differently. That difference changes behavior fast. Merchants raise prices, not always because they are greedy, but because they are protecting themselves against uncertainty. If today's coin feels weaker than yesterday's, the seller asks for more of it. A sack of grain now costs a larger pile of metal. Oil, cloth, transport, labor, all begin to adjust. Then wages start to break away from expectation. A soldier may still receive payment, but payment is no longer the same as security. An official may still collect salary, but salary buys less. A worker may still be paid in coin, but the coin no longer carries the same future inside it. That is when trust starts narrowing, and taxation becomes more painful as well. Because taxes often remain fixed in obligation, while the real burden shifts underneath them. The state still demands payment. Households still owe, but the coin moving through the economy has become less reliable, less stable, less trusted. So the distortion spreads. Prices move, wages lag, taxes bite harder. Credit becomes more fragile. Contracts become harder to judge. Markets stop feeling neutral. This is why monetary decline never happens in isolation. It does not stay inside the mint. It does not remain a technical matter of purity, weight, or silver content. It changes how people store wealth, how they price risk, how they trade, how they plan, how they protect themselves from one another. In other words, money losing value is not just a financial event. It is a social reorganization. Because once the coin weakens, society does not simply continue as before with different numbers. It starts behaving differently. The Ottoman case was not an accident. History had seen the pattern before. In the Roman world, the denarius once carried the authority of an expanding empire. It moved through military pay, taxation, trade, and urban life, much the way later coinage would do in other imperial systems. It was not just money in circulation. It was part of how Rome organized reach. But expansion has a cost. Armies had to be maintained, borders had to be secured, officials had to be paid, infrastructure had to be sustained across a vast political space, and as the imperial machine grew larger, the pressure on revenue grew with it. That pressure did not remain outside the coin. Over time, the silver content of the denarius was reduced. The coin still looked Roman,
It still carried imperial authority. It still entered daily exchange, but the substance inside it was shifting. And that is the point. When power needs money faster than the real economy can generate underlying value, the coin often becomes one of the first places where strain appears. Not always dramatically, not all at once. Sometimes through thinning silver, sometimes through altered standards, sometimes through a slow separation between official value and material reality. Rome shows that this is not a regional story. It is a structural one. Different empire, different century, same pressure. When the state grows heavier than the monetary base beneath it, money begins carrying more political burden than metal can safely hold. And once that happens, the coin is no longer just a medium of exchange. It becomes a record of imperial stress.
This is the point where monetary history stops feeling technical. Because once the coin weakens, the damage does not remain inside treasuries, mint houses, or accounting rooms. It reaches ordinary life. A soldier may still be paid, but if the coin in his hand buys less grain, less oil, less cloth, then pay has not really remained the same. The amount may look familiar. Its power inside daily life does not. That matters more than it seems. Armies do not run on symbols. They run on provisioning, confidence, and the belief that service will still support a household somewhere beyond the frontier. Once coinage weakens, that belief begins to thin. Merchants feel it too. They raise prices, often not because they are dishonest, but because they are trying to survive a world that has become harder to measure. If the coin arriving today feels less reliable than the one received last season, then every sale carries more risk. And risk is never absorbed evenly. It gets priced in. So grain costs more. Transport costs more. Basic goods drift upward. What once felt stable begins to feel conditional. And for ordinary people, that is where the deeper injury begins. Not always in dramatic hunger at first, sometimes in something quieter. The loss of predictability. A household can survive hardship more easily than uncertainty. But when money weakens, tomorrow becomes harder to calculate. Savings no longer feel safe. Wages no longer mean what they used to mean. Obligations remain, but the ground beneath them moves. Taxation becomes harsher in that world, not necessarily because the state changes its demand in moral terms, but because the same demand now lands on a more fragile reality. The tax still arrives. The coin still must be found. But the burden feels heavier because the money itself has become lighter in substance and less trustworthy in use. That is how unfairness begins to deepen. The merchant protects himself. The soldier demands more. The tax collector presses harder. The household absorbs the difference until it can no longer do so quietly. And this is why a coin crisis is never only about prices. It is about rule. Because governments do not govern by force alone. They govern through payment, expectation, regularity, and the belief that obligations still connect to a workable world. Once coinage weakens, all of that becomes more expensive to maintain. Resentment builds slowly. Trust narrows. Suspicion grows between classes, between buyer and seller, between taxpayer and state. The market becomes more defensive. Society becomes less generous. Authority becomes less credible. So a weakening coin does more than disorder exchange. It changes the emotional climate of a society. It teaches people to hoard, to hedge, to doubt,
to protect themselves first. And when enough people begin living that way at once, the problem is no longer monetary in any narrow sense. It has become political instability in slow motion.
Because a state whose money no longer feels fair, stable, or dependable is not merely facing an economic problem. It is beginning to lose one of the quiet systems through which order is maintained. Today, money no longer arrives mostly as silver in the hand. For most people, it appears as numbers on a screen, balances in an account, signals moving through institutions too large and distant to see. But the underlying logic has not disappeared. Money still works because people believe it will hold enough value to matter tomorrow, and because they believe it will still settle wages, debts, taxes, contracts, and ordinary obligations when the time comes. That is the continuity between their world and ours. The form has changed. The pressure has not. Modern states do not usually reduce silver in a coin to manage strain. But every monetary order still lives between the same forces: political spending, accumulated debt, inflation, institutional credibility, and
we
public
need a
trust.
decisive policy response
That
before
tension
the next
never
meeting.
fully goes away. Because money is not sustained by material alone. It is sustained by confidence organized at scale. And when that confidence weakens, people begin to behave differently long before a system openly breaks. They become more defensive, more suspicious, less willing to assume stability. That is why this story still matters. Not because the present is identical to the Ottoman Empire or to Rome. It is not. It matters because every monetary system, no matter how modern, depends on a fragile social agreement. That value will remain legible, obligations will remain payable, and the future will remain broadly calculable. When that agreement holds, daily life feels normal. When it starts to thin, the damage rarely stays financial for long. It moves into behavior, into politics, into trust itself. A coin does not lose its meaning on the day the metal disappears completely. By then, the truth is already too obvious. The deeper break comes earlier. It comes when society begins to sense that the symbol of authority stamped into money no longer guarantees what it once did. The coin may still circulate. It may still be accepted. It may still look official in the hand. But something essential has already shifted. Not only in the coin, in the people using it. Because money is never just stored inside metal. It is stored inside expectation. Inside the quiet belief that tomorrow's payment will still matter, that wages will still support life, that taxes, debts, prices, and obligations still belong to a world that can be measured and endured. When that belief begins to thin, the loss is larger than purchasing power. A society with weaker money does not simply become poorer. It becomes more suspicious, more guarded, less generous in what it assumes about others. People hold back. They hedge. They protect themselves sooner. They trust less easily. And that change matters. Because order is not maintained by force alone. It is maintained by habits of belief that allow strangers to trade, households to plan, merchants to price, workers to endure, and states to demand without constant resistance. Weak money strains those habits. It makes the future feel less legible. It makes obligation feel heavier. It makes fairness harder to recognize. That is why the history of coinage is never just about currency. It is about how power tries to preserve itself, how trust gets organized,
How daily life absorbs pressure. How instability begins long before collapse announces itself. So the real story is not that coins once contained less silver. It is that once money weakens, society begins to reorganize around doubt. And that is the part worth remembering. Because money does not merely reflect the condition of a civilization. It helps shape it. Money changes society.